Everybody ready?
So, ist wir alle bereit?
Alright, then good evening.
So, guten Abend.
Let us begin with a prayer.
Lasst uns mit Gebet anfangen.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you that we can gather now here.
Lieber himmlischer Vater, wir danken dir, dass wir hier zusammenkommen können.
And thank you that you have prepared your bread, your heavenly bread for us.
Und danke, dass du den himmlischen Brot für uns vorbereitet hast.
And help us that we would hear your voice now calling to us as a good shepherd.
Und hilf uns, dass wir dein Wort hören, gemäß der gute Hirte.
And that we would get to know you better and follow you.
Und dass wir dich besser kennenlernen würden und dich folgen würden.
And please help us now to be attentive and to receive that which you want to give us this evening.
So bitte hilft uns jetzt aufmerksam zu sein und das zu erhalten, was du uns an diesem Abend geben möchtest.
And please bless us all and bless this study.
Und bitte segne uns allen und segne auch jetzt diese Andacht.
In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesu Namen. Amen.
Okay, so posted some notes.
So, es gibt Notizen, die sind gepostet worden.
So some notes study that Brother Mark did in the last Buchnau seminar.
Das sind Notizen von einem Studium, die Bruder Mark gemacht hat zur letzten Buchenau-Seminar.
And we want to take some of those quotes.
Und wir wollen einige von diesen Zitaten anschauen.
Okay, so what we want to do this evening,
So, heute Abend das, was wir tun wollen.
we want to again look at Gog and Magog.
Wir wollen Gog und Magog anschauen.
And I just want to re-establish this point about that this is now an acted play, okay, what we can see.
Ich möchte nur nochmal tiefer etablieren, dass das, was wir gerade sehen, ist ein Anspielung.
Das ist sozusagen ein Schauspiel.
Ein Schauspiel, nicht Anspiel. Ein Schauspiel.
Okay. So, and this is so important that we understand this, and then once we understand this, we can better understand the different role players, okay?
Und das ist wichtig, dass wir dies verstehen. Und wenn wir es einst verstanden haben, dann können wir diese verschiedenen Rollenspielern oder Akteuren besser verstehen.
And by understanding then also who is playing which role,
Und dass wir verstehen, wer welche Rolle spielt.
then we can also better understand why they making these decisions that they are making at the moment.
Dann
Okay.
können wir besser verstehen, warum sie die Entscheidungen treffen, die sie in diesem Moment treffen.
Okay. And all right, let's leave it at that for now. So let's go in our notes down to page number 3.
So, in die Notizen gehen wir zur Seite 3 hinab.
Under the heading Acting Out Their Part.
Da gibt es eine Überschrift, ihre Rolle ausspielen.
Let's then begin in Ecclesiastes 1, verses 9 and 10.
Das ist Prediger 1, die Verse 9 und 10.
Everybody there?
Jeder da?
It says, "The thing that hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, See, this is new? It hath been already of all time, which was before." So everything that happens as an antitype must have been already be typified, right?
So, alles, was als Antitypus geschieht, muss bereits vorausgeschattet worden sein.
And therefore there's no new thing.
So, deswegen gibt es nichts Neues.
Now let's go to this next quote
Zu diesem nächsten Zitat jetzt
on education.
von Erziehung.
It says, "Every nation that has come up on the stage of action has been permitted to occupy its place on the earth, that it might be seen whether it would fulfill the purpose of the watcher and the Holy One." So here we can see, what do the nations do?
So, was tun die Nationen?
They come up on
The stage.
the stage, right?
Treten auf die Bühne auf.
Okay. And then it will be seen whether they fulfill now the appointed role that the Lord gave them or not. Okay?
Dann wird es gesehen werden, ob sie ihre bestimmte Rolle, die der Herr sie gegeben hat, erfüllen oder eben nicht.
So as prophecy has traced the rise and the fall of the world's great empires, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece and Rome. With each of these, as with nations of less power, history repeated itself. Each had its period of test, each failed, its glory faded, its power departed, and its place was occupied by another. Next quote, next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
The history of nations that one after another have occupied their allotted time and place, unconsciously witnessing to the truth of which they themselves knew not the meaning, speaks to us. So when the nations, they fulfilled their role,
Wenn die Nationen ihre Rolle erfüllt haben,
did they understand this
haben
themselves?
sie das selbst verstanden.
Whilst they were acting out, they didn't know.
Yes.
So, während sie das ausgespielt haben, nein, wussten sie nicht.
Who's the only one who understands this?
Wer ist der Einzige, der dies versteht?
Yeah, God's people, right?
So, Gottes Volk.
Only those, because it says the wise shall understand, right?
Nur diejenigen, weil es sagt, die Weisen werden verstehen.
So also only among God's people that really study present truth, they can understand.
So, nur die unter Gottes Volk, die gegenwärtige Wahrheit studieren, können es verstehen.
And for instance, when Cyrus conquered Babylon, did he have any clue that this was predicted by the Lord?
Zum Beispiel Kyros, als er Babylon eroberte, hatte er eine Ahnung, dass dies vom Herrn vorausgesagt würde?
At the
Dann-
beginning, no, right?
So am Anfang nicht.
But then,
Aber dann,
you can
Daniel
only,
told.
yeah, Daniel told him.
Daniel hat es ihm erklärt.
Okay, so once God's people show it, then they can understand.
So, wenn Gottes Volk sie das zeigen, dann können sie es wohl verstehen.
Okay, so to every nation and to every individual of today, God has assigned a place in His great plan. Today, men and nations are being measured by the plummet in the hand of Him who makes no mistake. All are by their own choice deciding their destiny, and God is overruling all for the accomplishment of His purposes. So the Lord, He obviously knows our decisions, okay?
So der Herr, der weist unsere Entscheidungen voraus.
Therefore, did you say weist or
Er weiß unsere Entscheidungen voraus.
in voraus, yes.
Yeah.
Because it's sounded like that He basically
Oh,
predestinates.
no.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so but He leaves you still the choice, okay?
Aber er überlässt dir immer noch den Wahl.
Yeah, but He already knows that you will choose this role and not that, okay?
Aber er weiß schon vorher, ob du dies oder jene Rolle spielen
And therefore, it's,
wählen wirst.
He's basically, therefore, He already wrote down the great, how you say it?
Outcome.
Result.
Drehbuch.
Oh, Script.
A script, yes.
Also der hat bereits der große Drehbuch geschrieben.
Yes. Okay. So, next quote
Nächster Zitat.
says, the world is a theater. So what is the world? It's a theater, right?
Die Welt ist ein Theater.
The actors, its inhabitants, are preparing to act their part in the last great drama. Okay, so here we can see we are in a great plan of acting, okay,
So.
great theater.
Hier können wir sehen, wir sind ein Teil des großen Theaters.
And we one time looked at this great role play of the disciples. Yes?
Und einmal haben wir auch diese große Rollenspiel der Jünger angeschaut.
We could also see that the disciples, they also played these different roles, right?
Da können wir auch sehen, dass diese Jünger diese verschiedenen Rollen gespielt haben.
Peter, for instance, he played so many roles. Okay.
Petrus zum Beispiel hat viele Rollen gespielt.
Okay. Yeah, like I don't know, 3 or 4 times the revelation. Okay.
3 oder 4 Mal hat er die Offenbarung gehabt zum Beispiel.
So, but also on a national scale, everything is a role play.
Aber auch auf einer nationalen Ebene, alles ist auch ein Rollenspiel.
Now let's go to the next quote.
Zur nächsten Zitat.
The people whom God had called to be the pillar and ground of the truth had become representatives of Satan. They were doing the work that he desired them to do, taking a course to misrepresent the character of God and cause the world to look upon him as a tyrant. The very priests who ministered in the temple had lost sight of the significance of the service they performed. They had ceased to look beyond the symbol of the things signified. In presenting the sacrificial offerings, they were as actors in a play. Okay, yeah, so also this was also acting out a play. Okay.
Das hier war auch ein Rollenspiel.
So whenever they killed an animal,
So, wenn auch immer die ein Tier getötet haben,
that was something that should typify something. Okay.
es war eine Sache, die was anders vorausschatten soll.
Okay, it was like a dress rehearsal, you can say. Okay.
How do you say that again?
Generalprobe.
Es war wie eine Generalprobe.
But I mean, it's got many significations because, in one sense, they were the priests slaying Christ.
Mm.
So, and I know that it has another connotation to that, but in one sense, that's what they were doing.
Yes,
They were
okay.
acting out the part where they were going to murder him.
That's also true. Yes.
Da ist auch diese andere Seite dazu, dieser Rollenspiel, dass die Priester haben Christus getötet. Also,
In a sense, everybody killed Christ, but they literally killed Christ in a sense, reject him.
so jeder, indem dass er ein Lamm getötet hat, hat Christus getötet, aber die Priester hat ihn getötet in dem Sinne, dass sie ihn verworfen haben.
Okay, so let's go now to this next quote.
Zu dem nächsten Zitat.
This is about those people that reject the gospel invitation.
Er
Okay.
spricht über diejenigen, die die Evangeliumseinladung ablehnen,
When the king makes this feast for his son.
wo der König ein Festmahl für seinen Sohn macht.
It says, so it is now. The excuses urged for refusing the invitation to the feast cover the whole ground of excuses for refusing the gospel invitation. So, and now jump down to the last boldfaced.
Zu den letzten Fettgedruckten.
Thus, they prove themselves to be the very actors described in the parable. The master of the feast regards their flimsy excuses as showing contempt for his invitation. And this invitation was what kind of invitation?
Und diese Einladung, was für eine Einladung war das?
A king's in
Royal.
Yes, she says the quote was a king's invitation.
Sagt hier in dem Zitat, es war eine Königseinladung.
Okay, and therefore which story comes in your mind?
Und deswegen, welche Geschichte kommt in dem Sinn? Esther.
Esther, yes.
So,
Okay.
die in Esther.
So Vashti is called by the king, right?
Vashti wird vom König gerufen
And she refuses.
und sie weigert
Yes.
sich.
So she plays a role, and Ahasuerus, a pagan king, also plays a role.
So,
Right?
sie spielt dann eine Rolle und Ahasuerus, ein heidnischen König, spielt auch eine Rolle.
Neither of them knew
Yes,
what role they were playing.
Exactly.
Aber
Okay.
keine von dem haben zu ihrer Zeit gewusst, die Rolle, die sie spielt.
Just like Cyrus, he also was a pagan king, literally,
Genauso wie Kyros, ein heidnischer König
but
buchstäblich.
he also played the role of Christ,
Aber er
right?
spielte auch die Rolle
Unknowingly.
von Christus, unbewusst.
Okay. So, therefore, this is one illustration where we can see a very nice illustration of this role play, right?
Hier, diese ist eine Darstellung, wo wir diesen Rollenspielen sehen können.
Okay, but yeah, so we understand all this, so we can just jump over this, the next quotes.
Das verstehen wir, also wir überspringen die nächsten Zitate.
Now let's go to the heading Black Slaves.
Und wir gehen zu den Überschrift schwarze Sklaven.
Okay, because this goes now to comes to the US Civil War.
Da
Okay.
spricht er über den US-Bürgerkrieg.
Okay, and let's read now here a little bit of this quote. Okay, let's just begin.
So, lesen wir diesen Zitat.
It says, when God called Moses to be his instrument in delivering the Hebrew nation out of cruel bondage, Moses considered the difficulties of the situation and thought of the obstacles that he would have to encounter in doing this great work. He knew that the people were in blindness and ignorance, that their minds had become beclouded in faith, and that they were almost destitute of a knowledge of God. So, here it speaks now about God's people back then in Egyptian bondage, right?
Hier spricht es über Gottes Volk damals in die ägyptische Knechtschaft.
And they were utterly depraved or degraded, right?
Und sie waren vollständig erniedrigt.
They lost the knowledge of God and they were blind and ignorant and all these things.
Also vollkommen abgefallen. Also die haben den Wissen von Gott verloren. And what else did you say?
Were blind and ignorant.
Also, die waren blind und ignorant.
They had become degraded by associating with a nation of idolaters, and had corrupted the ways by practicing idolatry. Yet there were many who were righteous and steadfast among this downtrodden people. The Lord directed Moses to give them a message from himself. He said, "Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm, and with great judgments. And I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you a God. And ye shall know that I am the Lord your God, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians." And now she compares this bondage of God's people in Egypt with the bondage of the black slaves in the United States back then.
Jetzt vergleicht sie diese Knechtschaft von Gottes Volk in Ägypten mit dieser Knechtschaft von den schwarzen Sklaven in den USA damals.
This nation of slaves was to be taught of God. Jesus Christ, enshrouded in the pillar of the cloud and fire, was to be their invisible leader, the ruler of all their tribes. Moses was to be... Oh no, sorry. It still speaks about the Hebrews.
So, das spricht immer noch über die
But
Hebräer.
it goes on now. It says, Moses was to be the mouthpiece of God. For 40 years, God ruled over them as they journeyed through the wilderness. But the Hebrew nation is not the only nation that has been in cruel bondage, and whose groanings have come to the ears of the Lord of hosts. The Lord God of Israel has looked upon the vast number of human beings who were held in slavery in the United States of America. Now she's making this link here.
So, hier macht sie diesen Verbindung.
The United States has been a refuge for the oppressed. It has been spoken of as the bulwark of religious liberty. God has done more for this country than for any other country upon which the sun shineth. It has been marvelously preserved from war and bloodshed. God saw the foul blot of slavery upon this land. He marked the sufferings that were endured by the colored people. He moved upon the hearts of men to work in behalf of those who were so cruelly oppressed. The southern states became one terrible battlefield. The graves of American sons who had enlisted to deliver the oppressed race are thick in its soil. Many fell in death, giving their lives to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prison to them that were bound. God spoke concerning the captivity of the colored people as verily as he did concerning the Hebrew captives, and said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows, and am come down to deliver them. So therefore we can see what role did the colored people play.
So, deswegen können wir sehen, welche Rolle spielte diesen Schwarzen damals.
The Jews
Yeah,
in bondage.
Also die Juden in Knechtschaft.
God's people in bondage, right?
Das Volk in Knechtschaft.
And God is acting now upon the same principles with them as he acted with the Hebrews back then. Okay.
Gott geht sie mit denselben Prinzipien, als wie mit den Hebräern damals umgegangen ist.
So they're in principle in the same bondage, and he brings them out.
So, im Prinzip sind die in denselben Knechtschaft und bringt sie heraus.
Okay. So therefore we can see literally the colored people back then, they were heathen, right?
Und wir können sehen, buchstäblich, die Schwarzen damals, die waren heidnisch.
Or the majority of them.
Oder die Mehrzahl von sie.
Yeah, they came from Africa, and they had, for instance, their tribal religion. Especially many had voodoo cults and all these things.
Sie kamen ursprünglich von Afrika hier und sie haben viele von denen ihre Urstammreligion. Viele von denen haben Voodoo und sowas praktiziert.
But still, the Lord is not wanting to highlight the literal, but they are playing a role.
Aber dennoch, der Herr möchte nicht auf das Buchstäbliche eingehen, sondern sie spielen eben eine Rolle.
So it has nothing to do with them being, let's say, voodoo worshippers, okay?
Also es hat nichts damit zu tun, dass sie zum Beispiel Voodoo-Anbetern waren.
Yeah, but it has something to do with their situation, and that the Lord can now use it
To illustrate something.
Yeah, to illustrate how he delivers you from bondage.
Sondern es hat was mit ihrem Situation zu tun und der Herr kann dies benutzen, um zu zeigen, wie er sie aus der Knechtschaft befreit.
Yeah, and who is always this the slave master, sorry.
Und wer ist immer der Sklaventreiber?
Satan, right?
Das ist Satan.
So back then it was Pharaoh.
Damals war es Pharao.
Here it's the southern states.
Hier ist den Südstaaten.
And when you go now to Isaiah 14,
Und wenn du zu Jesaja 14 in euren Bibeln gehst,
speaking about Satan here,
spricht über Satan hier.
so in verse 12 it says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer?" Right? And
12 und
then jump down to verse 17.
Vers 17.
That made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners. So what is Satan not doing?
So was tut Satan nicht? Captives.
Yeah, it's not letting go the captives. Right?
Er lässt seine Gefangenen nicht gehen.
And when you go now to Isaiah 45,
Wenn du zu Jesaja 45 gehst,
there you can see the contrast.
hier kannst du das Gegenstück sehen.
Yes. So verse 1,
Vers 1.
"Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus." Right? So speaking about Cyrus here.
Spricht über Kyros.
And then verse 13,
Vers 13.
what is Cyrus doing?
Was tut Kyros?
"I have raised him up in righteousness, and I will direct all his ways. He shall build my city." Satan, what is he doing with the cities?
Was tut Satan mit den Städten?
Destroying the cities.
Zerstört
Right?
sie.
But Cyrus is building up the city.
Er zeigt hier, dass Kyros die Stadt aufbaut.
"And he shall let go my captives, not for price nor reward, saith the Lord of hosts." So he's the one letting go the captives.
Er
Okay.
ist derjenige, der die Gefangenen freigehen lässt.
Okay. So Satan is the oppressor,
Satan ist der Unterdrücker,
Christ is the deliverer.
Christus der Befreier.
Yes.
Amen.
Okay. So and also at the moment, the Lord can use now this situation with Ukraine and Russia
Und auch jetzt in dieser Zeit, der Herr kann diese Situation mit Ukraine und Russland nutzen,
just to illustrate this principle very nicely.
um diesen Prinzip sehr schön dazu zeigen.
Ukraine, they want to break free
Ukraine möchte freibrechen
from this Russian influence,
von diesem russischen Einfluss,
but they don't want to let them go.
aber
Right?
sie im Gegenteil wollen sie nicht gehen lassen.
Okay, so and therefore the Lord can again use a pagan nation, okay,
Deswegen kann der Herr wieder eine heidnische Nation gebrauchen,
to illustrate God's people at the
um
end of the
Gottes
world.
Volk am Ende der Welt darzustellen.
Just like he used the black slaves, who was a pagan nation or pagan people,
So wie er den schwarzen Sklaven, die heidnischen Volk waren,
to illustrate still the bondage of God's people in the Sunday law. Right?
um die Gefangenschaft von Gottes Volk in den Sonntagsgesetzkrise darzustellen.
Yes. Let's go now to a second witness.
Gehen
Okay.
wir zur zweiten Zeuge.
Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 29.
Gehen wir zu Ezekiel 29.
Yes, no. Forgive me, I couldn't remember what
Okay, Ezekiel 29.
Ezekiel 29.
Let's begin in verse 18.
Und fangen wir in
Or in
Vers
17.
17 an.
It says, "And it came to pass in the 27th year, in the first month, in the first day of the month, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylon, caused his army to serve a great service against whom?
time.
Against Tyre.
Tyros.
And who is Tyre?
Wer ist Tyros?
The papacy.
Der
Right?
Papst.
So therefore Nebuchadnezzar in this instance is not the papacy or the king of the north or so. In a sense the false king of the north. Okay.
Nebuchadnezzar in diesem Sinne ist nicht der Papsttum oder der falsche König des Nordens.
It's like a parallel to Cyrus, the point Christ.
Yes.
Er ist
Okay.
wie eine Parallel zu Kyros in dieser Rolle, ist wie
Yeah,
Christus.
because Cyrus came to punish Babylon, right?
Kyros ist gekommen, um Babylon zu bestrafen.
So here Nebuchadnezzar comes to punish
Time.
Tyre.
So hier Nebuchadnezzar kommt, um Tyros zu bestrafen.
Okay. And it says here, every head, and he's the king of kings, right?
Und er ist ein König der Könige.
Okay. Every head was made bald, and every shoulder was peeled. Yet had he no wages, nor his army for Tyrus, for the service that he had served against it. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will give the land of Egypt unto Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylon, and he shall take a multitude, and take her spoil, and take her prey, and it shall be wages for his army. I have given him the land of Egypt for his labor, wherewith he served it against it, because they wrought for me, saith the Lord God. So
Vers 20.
Nebuchadnezzar gets now what country as a wage?
So Nebukadnezar erhält welches Land als
The whole
eine
world.
Belohnung?
Egypt, the whole world. Right?
Ägypten, die ganze Welt.
Because in Ezekiel 30, how many cities make up Egypt?
In Hesekiel 30, wie viele Städte machen Ägypten aus?
10.
10, right?
10.
So it's the 10 nations that is promised to Abraham, right?
Die 10 Nationen, die Abraham verhießen wurden.
So therefore Christ, he gets now Egypt
Deswegen Christus erhält Ägypten,
once Tyre gets punished,
nachdem Tyrus bestraft wird.
and its wages for whom?
Und das sind Belohnungen für wen? So,
His army.
seine
Okay.
Armee.
So who's Christ's army?
Und wer ist Christus, seine Armee?
His people, right?
Sein Volk.
Okay, so and do the saints inherit the earth?
Und
Yes.
erben den Heiligen die Erde?
Yes, right?
Ja.
Okay, but here Nebuchadnezzar's army, literally, who was it?
Aber hier Nebukadnezars Armee, wer war das buchstäblich?
Babylonians.
Babylonians.
Die
Okay.
Babylonier.
So Nebuchadnezzar literally was a Babylonian king, and his soldiers were literally Babylonians. Okay.
Nebukadnezar buchstäblich war ein babylonischer König und seine Soldaten buchstäblich Babylonier.
But they typify, they play the role of Christ and his people.
Also
Yes.
sie schatten voraus, sie spielen die Rolle eben von Christus und seinem Volk.
So therefore we have two witnesses, the black slaves in this illustration, that the pagan people can illustrate God's people.
So da
Okay.
haben wir zwei Zeugen, also die schwarzen Sklaven und diese Darstellung, dass ein heidnischen Volk Gottes Volk darstellen kann.
And we also saw, for instance, Ahasuerus, who was a pagan king, and Cyrus, who was a pagan king, could also illustrate Christ. Right?
Wir haben auch zwei Zeugen, also Ahasuerus, einen heidnischen König, und Kyros, einen heidnischen König auch. Beide konnten Christus oder haben Christus dargestellt.
So, and Vashti also, she was a pagan queen, and she also illustrated the disobedience of God's people. Okay.
Basti, sie war eine heidnische Königin und hat auch die Ungehorsam von Gottes Volk dargestellt.
Okay. So, it's therefore no breaking of any prophetic rules that Ukraine, as a pagan nation, can illustrate or play the role of God's people. Right?
Deswegen es bricht auch keinen prophetischen Regeln, wenn wir sagen, dass Ukraine, eine heidnische Nation, die Rolle von Gottes Volk spielt
Yes.
oder spielen kann.
Okay, good. So far, so good. Now let's look at another quote.
Und lasst uns jetzt ein weiteres Zitat anschauen.
I will post this.
Und das kommt zu uns in den Livestream alleine.
It's two quotes by the pioneers.
Das sind zwei Zitaten von den Pionieren her.
And we should also, I think, at least we shared them already, so you might be familiar with them.
Wir haben sie mal mitgeteilt, also vielleicht bist du diesen Zitaten bereits vertraut.
Okay, now comes the German.
Das Deutsche ist, kommt dazu, jetzt gleich.
Okay, so here's the first one. Okay, so in this now the pioneers commentary about Ezekiel 38.
Das sind die Pionieren ihre Kommentare über Hesekiel 38.
38 and 39 speaking about Gog and Magog, right?
30 und 39, da spricht über Gog und Magog.
It says here,
Sagt,
many people have read the 38th and the 39th chapters of Ezekiel and have wondered and longed to know what those two chapters can mean, what it is to which they refer. And all this time, the first verses of these same chapters of Ezekiel tell definitely what is referred to, what nation of today is meant in those two chapters. Read the verses. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. In the Revised Version it runs thus: Son of man, set thy face toward Gog, the land of Magog, the prince of Rush, Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him. And the same connection is found in the third verse just following, and also in the 39th chapter. Now we shall not attempt an exposition of these 2 chapters. We simply point out the meaning of the names that are spoken, that all may plainly see what nations is referred to, and that nation is Russia. Okay, so here they say that nation is Russia, right?
Hier sagen sie, diese Nation ist Russland.
So Meshech and Tubal and Magog, okay?
Meshech und Tubal und Magog.
It's illustrate Russia and the king of it is Gog.
Es stellt Russland dar und der König dessen ist Gog.
Okay. In the literal geographical area. Okay.
In das buchstabliche geografische Umgebung.
Now let's go to this next quote.
Zum nächsten Absatz oder nächsten Zitat.
We have already seen that the land of Magog, through his descendants, comprises the entire country of northern Asia, from Germany to the Pacific Ocean. This prophecy of Ezekiel refers in some way to the last days, and shows that then Russia and the prince of Russia will be the chief of all that country, and that Meshech and Tubal would also dwell in the land of Magog under its Russian chief. So that 587 years BC, 2447 years ago, the prophet of God pointed out the Russian Empire as it exists today. The scripture is given by inspiration of God. Okay, so when you now look at Russia, right?
Wenn du jetzt Russland anschaust,
We made this point many times. How is it composed of?
so, wir haben diesen Punkt einige Male oder viele Male gemacht. Aus was besteht es? Federation of Nations.
Yes, a confederation of nations, right?
Eine Föderation von Nationen.
Okay, and so in Gog and Magog, what does it illustrate at the end of the world, like at the end of the 1,000 years?
Und Gog und Magog, was stellt es da am Ende der 1000 Jahre?
I mean, in Revelation 20,
In Offenbarung 20.
All the nations.
the whole world, right?
Also die gesamte Welt.
Sister White says the whole wicked world will stand arrayed at the judgment bar of God. Yes?
Also White sagt, die ganze böse Welt wird vor dem Gerichtsthron Gottes stehen.
So let's just go to Revelation 20
Offenbarung 20.
and let's read verses 7 to
Die Versen 7
9.
bis 9.
It says, "And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the 4 quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, in the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them." Okay, so it's the sand of the sea.
So
Yes?
wie das Sand des Meeres.
So now I will just draw this out. Let me draw this out like this first. Okay. Okay, so not a perfect depiction, but it should refer to the Russian Empire, okay? Russian Federation.
Also das soll
Okay.
Russland darstellen, die russische Föderation.
Russian Federation. Okay. And but
It's the 10 kings.
yeah, I mean they are now divided up in all these small states, right? Countries.
Sie
So
sind alle zerteilt in diesen kleinen Regionen oder Staaten.
and we saw this typifies at the end of the 1,000 years the whole world, right?
Und wir haben gesehen, dies schattet am Ende der gesamten Welt, am Ende der 1000 Jahren, die gesamte Welt.
Okay. And whom are they coming against at the end of the 1,000 years?
Und am Ende der 1000 Jahren, gegen wem kommen sie an?
Jerusalem.
Yeah, against God's people,
Gegen
right?
Gottes Volk an.
Okay. So and what does the Bible say? Who is God's people?
Und was sagt die Bibel? Wer ist oder wer sind Gottes Volk?
I mean, what is God's people what are we, for instance, trying to do at the moment?
So Gottes Volk zum Beispiel, was versuchen wir gerade jetzt zu tun?
And the Galatians 4 experience, okay?
Unter der Galater 4 Erfahrung.
Just think about the three heavens.
Und
Okay.
gedenke über die 3 Himmel.
In which heaven are we at the moment?
Und welche Himmel befinden wir uns gerade?
The first, right?
Erste.
What are we trying to do?
Was versuchen wir zu tun? Breakthrough.
Yeah, we're trying to break away from the earth, right?
So, wir versuchen von der Erde loszukommen,
Trying to break away from Satan.
von
Yes?
Satan loszukommen.
Okay, so God's people is constantly trying to break away from this world,
So
right? From
God
Satan
is-
and his rulership.
Gottes Volk versuchen beständig von dieser Welt, von Satan und seiner Herrschaft loszukommen.
But what is Satan trying to do?
Aber was versucht Satan zu tun? Not let you go.
Yeah, not let us go, right?
Uns nicht gehen lassen,
To keep us in bondage.
um uns in die Knechtschaft zu halten.
Okay, so that's basically the theme of the great plan of salvation.
Und das
Okay?
ist das Gesamtthema des großen Erlösungsplans.
So you and I, where are we living in at the moment?
So, du und ich, where are we living in?
Yes. Oh,
Worin leben wir gerade?
But in this
Bondage.
house,
oh, we're living in the world, right?
Also wir leben in der Welt.
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so we are part of Babylon. We are part of Gog and Magog. In
So,
this
wir
sense,
sind
okay?
ein Teil von Babylon, ein Teil von
Ja.
Gog und Magog
Yes.
in diesem Sinne.
But Christ says you should be, you are in the world, but you should not be
Auf.
of the world. Okay.
Aber Christus sagt, ihr seid zwar in die Welt, aber ihr sollt nicht Teil der Welt sein.
Okay, let me just quickly see if I can find this quickly.
Was he on?
Just looking for. Sure. Okay, doesn't matter, I don't find anything appropriate at the moment. Okay, so yeah, therefore God's people must be, they're part of the world, right?
So, Gottes Volk, die sind ein Teil der Welt,
But they are not of the world.
aber wir
Okay,
sind nicht von der Welt.
okay, so therefore if Russia is now illustrating the world,
So, wenn
Okay.
Russland jetzt die Welt darstellt,
then Ukraine would be a part of it, okay?
Ukraine wäre ein Teil davon,
Yeah, because we are part of this world,
weil wir
okay?
ein Teil dieser Welt sind.
Okay, so and this is just an illustration then how this great Russian army, this Goliath,
Und dies ist nur eine Darstellung, wie diese große russische Armee, also diese Goliath an sich,
comes against those that try to break free.
kommt
Okay,
gegen die an, die versuchen loszukommen.
trying to keep them in bondage, trying to keep them away from freedom.
Versucht
Okay.
sie in der Gefangenschaft zu halten, sie fern von der Freiheit zu halten.
Okay, but what did we read about? What is this world?
Aber wie haben wir gelesen, was ist diese Welt?
It's a theater,
Es
right?
ist ein Theater.
So therefore this here is now a theater.
So,
Okay.
dies hier ist ein Theater.
Stage play.
Okay. So and who is at the moment looking at this theater, or who's looking at the world when we say the world is a theater? Who is looking onto the world?
Wenn wir sagen, dass die Welt ein Theater ist, wer ist es, der zuschaut?
Everyone else.
Yeah, all the angels, all the unfallen worlds, right?
Sind all die Engel, all die ungefallene Welten.
Okay, so therefore, in this illustration now, who is now surrounding and watching this scenario, this theater?
In dieser Darstellung, wer umgibt und schaut diesem Bühnenspiel zu?
The other nations.
All the other nations on this planet,
All die
right?
anderen Nationen auf der
Ja.
Erde.
But they are not
Part of this.
part of this theater, right?
Aber die sind nicht Teil dieses Theaters.
Because this already illustrates the whole world.
Weil
Okay.
dies bereits stellt die ganze Welt dar.
So all the other nations that now look upon what is going on here,
So all die anderen Nationen, die schauen, was hier abgeht, an.
Yeah, they illustrate the angels and the unfallen worlds. Okay.
Sie stellen die Engel und die ungefallenen Welten dar.
Yeah, looking at this theater.
Und schauen diesem Theater, diesem Bühnenspiel zu.
Yes, everybody sees this?
Kann jeder
Okay.
das sehen?
So Ukraine is this little people, okay,
Ukraine ist dieses kleine Volk.
now facing this huge army.
Sie steht diesen großen Armee gegenüber.
And what does it say? Let's go to Revelation 16.
Das sagt es in Offenbarung 16. Lass uns dahin.
Verse 12.
Vers 12.
It says, And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. So, and he gathered them, in verse 16, into the place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. Yes? Okay. So, this is also now this vast army
Das ist diese riesige Armee,
that now comes against God's people.
die
Yes?
gegen Gottes Volk ankommt.
Okay. And what must you do in order that you can deliver out of this?
Und was musst du tun, um hieraus befreit zu werden?
You must cry day and night for deliverance.
Du
Yes?
musst Tag und Nacht nach Befreiung rufen.
Okay. And what is from day one, what was Zelensky and the Ukrainians doing?
Und von Tag 1 an, was tat Zelensky und die Ukrainer?
So did he flee away?
Ist er weggeflüchtet worden?
No, right?
Ja.
Asking for assistance
Yes, he said
from the unfallen world.
exactly.
Hat die ungefallenen Welten um Hilfe gebeten.
He asked all the other nations which illustrate the unfallen worlds. Okay.
Er hat alle anderen Nationen, die all diese ungefallenen Welten darstellen,
He asked them, please send me weapons. Okay.
sende mich Waffen.
Okay. Now let's go to, I think it's 2 Corinthians chapter 11,
Gehen wir zu 2. Korinther 11.
maybe 10. I don't know. It's 10, chapter
2.
10.
Korinther 10 sogar.
Why, I mean, you'll be careful how you illustrate that, because you don't pray to the unfallen worlds, but the point is he's praying for deliverance, and
Yeah, I mean he's asking right for
yes.
aid.
So,
Okay.
er bittet um Hilfe.
Okay. So let's go now to 2 Corinthians chapter 10.
2. Korinther 10,
And let's begin in verse 1.
Vers 1.
It says, Now I, Paul, myself beseech you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ, who in presence am base among you, but being absent am bold toward you. But I beseech you that I may not be bold when I am present with that confidence wherewith I think to be bold against some, which think of us as if we walked according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. So what is he not doing? He's not warring after the flesh, right?
So, kämpft nicht dem Fleisch nach.
Verse 4.
Vers 4.
For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So, what is Paul saying? What are our weapons?
So, was sagt Paulus? Was sind unsere Waffen?
Are not carnal, right?
Sind nicht fleischlich.
And we have these spiritual weapons.
Wir haben diese
Right?
geistlichen
And we have the Word of God.
Wir haben das Wort Gottes.
And what gives us the power against Satan?
Und was ist es, was uns die Macht gegen Satan gibt?
The grace, right?
Gnade.
Okay, so the graces of God, all his gifts, these are our weapons, right?
So, die Gnaden Gottes, all diese Gaben, das sind unsere Waffen.
And how is he sending us these things?
Und wie sendet er uns diese Sachen? Die Angels.
When you pray,
Yes, when we pray through the angels, right?
Und wir beten, er sendet sie durch den Engel.
Okay, so therefore, this is obviously a literal illustration of this.
So,
Okay,
natürlich, dies ist eine buchstäbliche Darstellung hiervon.
so these weapons
So, diese Waffen,
that come now from the unfallen worlds, through these angels,
diese
okay,
Waffen, die kommen von den ungefallenen Welten, von diesen Engeln her.
yeah, they illustrate the the grace that the Lord is sending him to fight this battle.
Sie
Okay.
stellen die Gnade, die der Herr ihm sendet, um diesen Kampf zu bekämpfen.
And what just happened recently?
Und was ist gerade soeben geschehen?
And so,
Heavy weapons.
yeah, at the beginning, yeah, all the nations, they just sent these light weapons. Okay.
So, am Anfang, alle Nationen haben diese leichte Waffen gesandt.
Austria, for instance, they sent
Helmets.
5,000 Corona masks or something.
So, Österreich haben Corona, I thought they sent
Helmets also.
Also die haben
Germany and
5000
Austria
Helme oder
sent
sowas
helmets.
gesandt.
Okay. And then they sent also Corona equipment. Okay.
Und dann haben sie auch Corona-Bekämpfungsmasken und sowas gesandt.
Okay, but okay, Austria is also considered to be a neutral state, so that's probably also one of the reasons. Okay.
Österreich ist auch eine sogenannte neutralen Staat, also deswegen vielleicht.
But anyways, yeah, so they sent machine guns, they sent these anti-tank missiles and all these things. Okay.
Sie haben Maschinengewehre und diese Anti-Panzer-Raketen und solche Sachen gesandt.
But now, since Putin withdrew for a short moment and now he comes back with a new vengeance, right?
Aber da Putin hat für kurze Zeit zurückgezogen und jetzt kommt er wieder mit Wut,
What is now all these other countries doing?
was tun all diese anderen Länder?
They send now heavy weapons, right?
Sie senden jetzt schwere Waffen,
They send now tanks,
sie senden Panzer,
they send these artillery.
sie senden Artillerie.
I think they even want to send planes. I don't know what they already did. But
Die wollen sogar Flugzeuge senden, einige haben sie schon bereits.
okay, so we can see what does this therefore illustrate?
So was stellt das deswegen dar?
Increase of grace, right?
Ein Zuwachs an Gnade.
Okay. As now Satan comes back with more vengeance, the Lord gives added grace
So,
to meet the
Satan
emergency.
kommt mit
right?
mehr Wut zurück, der Herr gibt zusätzliche Gnade zu, um es zu begegnen.
So, and therefore we can see that basically how the other world, the other nations, they illustrate these other worlds, right? These unfallen worlds, these heavenly kingdoms. Okay.
Deswegen können wir sehen, diese anderen Nationen stellen diese ungefallene Welten dar, also diese himmlische Königreiche.
And Zelensky is basically asking continuously for help. Okay.
Und Zelensky, der bittet beständig nach Hilfe.
And it says, "Ask and you shall
Es sagt, bittet
receive."
und ihr
Okay.
werdet bekommen.
So this is an illustration. Yeah, this whole war, and Brother Mark mentioned this already,
Und dies ist eine Darstellung, also dieser ganze Krieg, und Bruder Mark hat dies bereits erwähnt,
is an object lesson how we need to behave in the spiritual war in order to be set free. Okay.
ein Beispiel oder ein Schauspiel, wie wir in den geistlichen Krieg uns benehmen sollten, um freigesetzt zu werden.
But it's also an illustration what terrible punishment will come upon those of us who reject the truth, right?
Aber es ist auch eine Darstellung, welche eine schreckliche Bestrafung auf diejenigen von uns kommen werden, die die Wahrheit ablehnen.
Because Brother Mark also showed there are two Jerusalems illustrated right there and there, right?
Weil Bruder Mark hat bereits gezeigt, das sind zwei Jerusalemme, die gerade da gezeigt werden.
Those that get destroyed illustrate the wicked Jerusalem.
So, diejenigen, die zerstört werden, stellen die böse Jerusalem dar.
Those that remain illustrate the righteous Jerusalem.
Und diejenigen, die bleiben, der gerechte Jerusalem.
And the Lord, He allows this terrible calamity to take place just to show us through which struggle we need to strive through. Okay.
Und der Herr erlaubt diese schrecklichen Sachen stattzufinden, nur um uns zu zeigen, welchen Kampf wir hindurchgehen müssen.
But those Ukrainian soldiers,
Aber
okay,
diese ukrainischen Soldaten,
I mean, there were many soldiers from other countries, right? They came.
es gab
Fight
viele
it.
Soldaten von anderen Ländern, die gekommen sind, um zu kämpfen.
For instance, from the United States who served in the Afghanistan War,
Zum
or the
Beispiel von den
Iraq War.
USA, einige, die in den Afghanen oder den Iraki-Kriege gedient
And
haben.
they went home pretty quickly again. Okay.
Sie sind schnell wieder nach Hause gegangen.
And they said such firepower they never experienced in Afghanistan nor in Iraq.
So,
Okay.
Solches Feuerkraft haben sie in Afghanistan oder Irak noch nie erfahren.
And, I mean, that's obvious, right? You have a few terrorists with little weapons against the Russian army with big cannons. Okay.
Ja, offensichtlich. Also diese paar Terroristen mit diesen Kleingewehren und auf der anderen Seite hast du Russland mit diesem Bollwerk von Waffen.
But you have then the Ukrainian forces.
Aber die ukrainischen Kräfte,
They say we're not backing off. Okay.
Also wir ziehen nicht zurück.
And other soldiers say about them they're the bravest soldiers they ever met.
Und
Okay.
andere Soldaten sagen über sie, das sind die tapfersten Krieger, die sie je begegnet sind.
But is it something out of themselves?
Aber ist das irgendetwas aus sich
No, let's
heraus?
go to Zechariah
Nein,
chapter
zu Zacharia,
11 or 12. Let's see.
Zacharia 11
No,
oder
12.
12.
12.
Zacharia 12.
It's like the in the US Civil War, that all of a sudden an angel came down and put fear in the hearts of the North and they fled away.
Das ist wie in der US-Bürgerkrieg. Plötzlich kam ein Engel herab und hat Furcht in den Herzen der Nordarmee gesetzt und sie sind davongelaufen.
Yes.
And at the same hand, Christ can also give you your heart strength to endure things because it's for His purpose.
Andersrum, Christus kann auch dein Gemüt oder dein Herz stärken, um die Sachen hindurchzugehen, weil es für seine Zwecke, zu seinen Zwecken dient.
Yes.
But man always exalts himself, and this is what's terrible.
Aber der Mensch, der erhöht sich in solche Situationen, das ist das Schreckliche.
It says the White House is quoted, God will send light and power to meet the emergency, right?
White hat diesen Zitat, dass der Herr Licht und Kraft senden wird, um das Not zu begegnen.
But he will not send it beforehand, he will only send it when it's necessary.
Aber
Okay.
er wird es nicht zuvor senden, sondern nur, wenn es nötig ist.
Okay, therefore when we come into these different crises,
So
okay,
deswegen, wenn wir in diesen verschiedenen Krisen hineinkommen,
the Lord, He can, if we made the right preparation, He can give us the strength of will and heart that we can never think of. Okay.
wenn wir die richtigen Vorkehrungen einräumen, dann der Herr kann uns
Strength of will and heart.
eine Kraft des Willens und des Herzens geben, die wir ja gar nicht denken können.
Okay, so let's go to Zechariah 12, verse 1.
So, jetzt Zacharia 12 und Vers 1.
Speaking here also about the besieging of Jerusalem.
Er spricht über die Belagerung von Jerusalem.
It says, the burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, which stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. So they besiege now Jerusalem.
Sie belagern Jerusalem.
And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. So how many people are gathered against it?
So, wie viele Menschen sind dagegen angesammelt?
All the people of the earth, right?
Alle Menschen der Erde.
Which is Gog and
Das ist Gog und
Magog. Right?
Magog.
Okay, verse 4.
Vers 4.
In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment, and his rider with madness, and I will open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength, and the Lord of hosts their God. In that day I will make the governors of Judah like an hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf. And they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left. And Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. The Lord also shall save the tents of Judah first, and the glory of the house of David, and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, as the angel of the Lord before them. So, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. So according to verse 8,
Bis Vers 9 haben wir gelesen. Also gemäß Vers 8,
what is the Lord giving his people?
was gibt der Herr sein Volk?
He that is feeble among them shall be as David, it says, right?
So, derjenige, der schwach unter sie ist, wird wie David sein.
And the house of David shall be as God, as the angel of the Lord before them.
Das Hause Davids wird wie Gott sein, wie der Engel des Herrn vor sie.
And so here we can see that the Lord, he can give you this supernatural strength.
Hier können wir sehen, der Herr kann dir diese übernatürliche Kraft verleihen.
Okay. So Yeah, therefore, we have all these illustrations that we can see how the Lord is acting out these things before our eyes. Okay?
Deswegen haben wir all diese Darstellungen hier, die wir sehen können, wie der Herr diese Sachen genau vor unseren Augen ausspielen lässt.
And it's a theater,
Es ist ein Theater
and we are now like these unfallen worlds looking at it and observing what is happening.
und
Okay?
wir sind wie diese ungefallene Welt, die da zuschauen und sehen, was da geschieht.
Yes. And this is, as I mentioned, only a foreshadow of the struggle we must go through in order to be set free from Satan. Okay?
Wie ich bereits erwähnt habe, dies ist nur eine
Vorausschattung.
Vorausschattung dessen, also den Kampf, den wir hindurchgehen mussten, um von Satan befreit zu werden.
And it's really merciful how the Lord does it. Right?
Und es ist sehr gnädig oder erbarmungsvoll, wie der Herr das tut.
I mean, he's not letting us suffer now.
So, lässt uns in dieser Zeit nicht leiden.
He's permitting this to take place first in order to give us already something that we can relate to and then prepare ourselves mentally for what is coming. Okay?
Lässt dies zuerst ausspielen, damit wir haben irgendetwas, zu dem wir beziehen können,
That we can mentally prepare for what is coming.
dass wir uns dann mental darauf vorbereiten können, auf das, was noch kommen wird.
Yes?
Amen.
Right. Okay. So, therefore, let's take these thoughts. Okay.
So lass uns diese Gedanken behalten.
And also, especially that this is a theater, that this illustrates this whole world.
Und
Okay.
auch, dass dies hier ein Bühnenspiel ist, die die gesamte Welt darstellt.
And that all these other nations are these onlookers
Und all die
From
anderen
the-
Nationen der Welt in diesem
from the
Schauspiel
heavenly
sind
kingdom. Okay.
den Zuschauern im himmlischen Königreich.
And I don't know, we also have some further thoughts. We first need to validate them.
Wir haben auch einige andere Gedanken dazu, aber wir müssen sie erst bestätigen.
And if these thoughts are valid thoughts, then we already know what will happen. Okay.
Und wenn diese Gedanken gültige Gedanken sind, dann wissen wir bereits, was geschehen
Ja.
wird.
But we first need to prove them.
Aber wir
Okay.
müssen sie zuerst prüfen.
Okay, but everybody could follow this illustration.
Aber jeder konnte diese Darstellung soweit folgen.
Okay, it's very clear, right?
Das ist sehr klar.
And it's very clear that the heathen nation can illustrate God's people, like the black slaves, like the Babylonian army.
Sehr
Okay.
klar, dass eine heidnische Nation Gottes Volk darstellen kann, wie die schwarzen Sklaven oder die babylonische Nation.
And therefore, we have all the evidences piling upon each other.
Und deswegen haben wir alle Beweisstücke, die aufeinander haufen.
And we only need to really now understand this judgment precisely that is coming. Okay.
Wir müssen nur genau diese Gericht, der kommt, noch verstehen.
And we can be sure that it's hastening on.
Und ihr konntet sicher sein, dass es eilt dazu.
Amen?
Amen.
Okay, so then let's pray for these things, that the Lord gives us further understanding.
Dann lasst uns dafür beten, dass der Herr uns weiteres Verständnis gibt.
And then we can see how these things will develop.
Dann werden wir sehen können, wie sie diese Sachen entfalten werden.